What is an inelastic collision? What is conservation of momentum? An inelastic collision is a collision where the total energy is kept the same both before and after the collision, but the kinetic energy is not kept the same. That means that the energy goes into other types of energy like thermal and electrical. But how do you find kinetic energy? The formula for kinetic energy is half the mass multiplied by the velocity squared. Well, what about conservation of momentum? Conservation of momentum is split into two different parts: perfect conservation and partial conservation. With a perfect conservation, the two objects that collide will have the exact combined momentum when they do collide. A partial is only having a part of that momentum when they collide. Things with a large muse, or things that don't slide well or roll well, will end up only having partial momentum. If you try and roll a ball down a hill and hit a rectangle, then they will only have a partial conservation. Let's put this to the test. What will happen if I put two cars from train on a track and roll them into each other? They would attach. If both cars weigh 10 kilograms and one is moving 10 meters per second while the other is standing still, what will happen when they collide? They both get a velocity of 5 meters per second. But what about the kinetic energy? Well, the first car is moving at 10 meters per second and also has a weight of 10 kilograms. If the kinetic energy formula is half the mass times the velocity squared, half of 10 would equal 5. So that would be 5 as the mass. And the velocity squared would be 100 squared, which equals 100. So 5 times 100 equals 500. That would be the kinetic energy of the first car. But once it collides with the second car, they would both have a velocity of only 5, which means the mass would stay the same, but the velocity would change. The velocity would drop to 5, which means that it would only equal the kinetic energy 125. And that would be put in joules, because joules equals the kinetic energy, SI unit. So what did we learn? Well, an inelastic collision is where the total energy is the same both before and after the collision, but the kinetic energy is not the same. And in conservation of momentum, when two things collide, they can either have the same exact momentum both before and after, or they can only have a partial amount of what was before.